In this video, I want to go over the top 5 mistakes to avoid when buying a knife. So anyone who's been into knife collecting for long enough has bought a knife that they thought they would absolutely love, but then they either don't like it or just never get to use it. So I want to give you some tips to avoid that. So let's get right into it. Mistake number 1 is blindly trusting reviews. So don't get me wrong, I love watching YouTube videos and reading reviews on knives. Like, I do that almost daily. And I plan to do a lot of reviews on this channel too. But there's a few reasons you shouldn't just blindly trust a reviewer. And the main one of these is that the reviewer might be paid for their review. So when I say paid, that can either be money or free product. On the money side, when it's an issue, is that they get paid for a positive review, even though they might not actually like the product, or they might not even really test it because they just want to say the talking points. When it comes to free products, typically how this plays out is that the reviewer wants to continue to get free products. So they're not going to rag on the knife too hard because they want to continue that positive relationship with the company. The other way this can play out is that the reviewer has a bias, like psychologically, towards the product because that company supported them, reached out and gave them free stuff, and because the knife was free, if you think about it, if you had a free knife, someone just gave it to you, or you spent $300 on one, you're going to be a lot more harsh towards that $300 of your own money compared to free. Because if there's some stuff wrong with it, it's not that big of a deal. You got it for free anyways. I don't think that really means anything against the reviewers. They probably don't even know they're doing it in a lot of cases. But it can change your opinion. So this isn't every influencer. I've seen reviewers get a product for free or get paid by a company or have some kind of sponsorship with them. They don't like something about it and they absolutely destroy it. Like, it breaks on camera and they still show it to you. So some of them are awesome, it's just something to be aware of. The other thing that can happen with blindly trusting reviews is that the reviewer just might not have the same needs or have the same taste you do. So obviously, when it comes to style and stuff, that's all opinions. There's not really a right and wrong. But what can happen is, let's say their hands are like a size SL glove and you're a small. A knife isn't going to be comfortable to you and them at the same time, typically. You might love something and they might think you can't get a good grip on it. So just know it is personal in some cases. And the other thing with reviewers is that they might have got a hand-picked sample from a company where theirs is really nice, but the fit and finish normally isn't that high level. Or I've seen it where they've gotten a lemon, like a one-off that's not good, but every other one typically is awesome. So what I like to do is use reviewers as a starting point. So you can get some stats, you can get the basic layout, learn the features, get their opinion, but then try to get other reviews and kind of balance that out. So this doesn't mean ignore reviews and influencers. Like I said, I plan on making reviews too, but it's one data point. So mistake number 2 is buying the alternative, especially because it's cheaper. So what I mean by this is there's a knife that you really, really want, but there's a cheaper model, or like a knockoff version. Maybe not knockoff in like fake Rolex style, just someone who makes a similar design but cheaper. Like an Amazon knife, basically. Don't get me wrong, I am a cheap bastard about most things. But the difference between a $30 Amazon knife and a $200 or $150 knife is huge. What I've done before is I've gone cheap. I've made this mistake a few times. And what happens is the blade won't hold an edge because it's a cheap steel. The lockup isn't very good. The finish wears off really quickly. It just really doesn't hold up. I think you'd be much, much happier waiting a few months and buying what you really, truly want. I think the term buy once, cry once is normally an excuse to buy something you really shouldn't be buying. But honestly, when it comes to knives and just kind of EDC gear in general, most of the time it's true. You're better off getting a piece that will last you for years. Like maybe even decades, compared to a cheap knife that just really won't hold up. Alright, so mistake number 3 is kind of the opposite of that, and this is the one I think is going to get me in trouble, and that is that you should never use debt to buy a knife. So I try to live totally debt-free, And I could go full Dave Ramsey here and tell you all the reasons not to buy a knife with debt. But instead, what I'm going to do is tell you how I would go about buying one if there was something I didn't have the money for right now. So I'm going to use a really basic sample and keep the numbers really simple. Let's say there's a $300 knife you've been wanting, which is fairly expensive, and you have 3 months before you really want it, meaning that it's like for hunting season, or you have a camping trip coming up and you want it before then. So basically what you can do is do the reverse math on the timing. So 3 months, $300, $100 a month. Then break it down by week. So that's $25 a week. Most of us can find a way to cut out $25 a week and save that back. The nerdy finance term for that is a sinking fund. So mistake number 4 is always buying the iconic knife. So when I say the icon, I mean a knife that is one of those like category top super recommended knives. So think SE for bushcraft. If you go on any forum or watch any video of the top bushcraft knives under a certain amount of dollars, it's probably going to be on there. And I've seen a lot of people say you have to have one in a bushcraft collection. And Spyderco's or Benchmade's are kind of like this for pocket knives. But I want to make the point, it's not always the right thing to buy. So the first time I'm going to say it's not right to buy that iconic, really top recommended knife is if it's in a category you don't really care about. So let's say SE for example. If you don't really care about like generic bushcraft camping knives, and really what you care about are collection pieces, or you really like exotic materials, or really cool folding mechanisms, like the engineering or the craftsmanship of it, they're not for you. I'm not saying they're not awesome, because they totally are. They're one of the ones I recommend most of the time if people are asking me about it. But if you're not going to use it for those purposes, there's not really a reason to buy one. The other time I see this come up a lot is there's something like, let's say, Spyderco, and people hate the design. Like, I see a lot of people say they think they're just ugly. And if that's the case, then don't buy it. There are so many good options right now. Like, whatever color you want, whatever blade material you want, whatever design, any carry method. There's probably a knife made by a really good manufacturer pretty close to your price range that you can buy instead of the highly recommended ones. Which I will say, typically, they're in that category for a reason. They're almost always amazing knives. So if you're looking for something like a pocket knife or a camping knife or a hunting knife or whatever it is, you really should look at them and consider them, but just because they're like the top of the class doesn't mean it's what you have to buy. And I want to really stress here, you can have a really complete, awesome knife collection without having every one of these iconic knives. Mistake number 5 is not considering your carry options. So with pocket knives, this isn't as big of a deal. Typically it's tip up, tip down, left and right hand carry, and then just making sure it's something reliable that won't break. But outside of that, there's not a ton to think about. I think with fist blade knives is where it really matters. So some of them don't come with a sheath at all. And if that's the case, then you are going to have to spend probably 80-ish bucks to get something custom made. And that's almost $100 more you have to add on. It's probably going to have shipping too. So you're close to $100 more for that knife. Then some carriers upcharge you to add one in, like maybe 20, 30 bucks for leather, sometimes more. Kydex can be pretty expensive depending on what it is. So if that's the case, when you're comparing knives, you really have to think about that. The other thing is the quality of the sheath that comes with it. I have a couple that are just like really cheap plastic. Like I don't think they're even technically Kydex. And they have like the worst belt clips, where when you pull it out, the entire sheath comes with the knife. So they're basically useless. Even though I kind of like the knives, I would never carry it just because I don't like my option to carry it. And this gets really complicated really fast. You have to think about, do you want leather? Do you care about what color the leather is? How far up or down on the belt does it ride? Is it vertical? Does it have a dangler? Is it Kydex? Is it Tech-Lock compatible if it is Kydex? These are all things you have to think about. Do they have loops or a clip? So all of these things really matter. Sometimes, like with Kydes, you can put belt loops aren't about anything, depending on how it's set up, but it's all stuff you need to think about. The reason I think this really matters is you're going to spend far more time carrying your knife than using your knife. So how it carries is really important. I do have a bonus mistake here, and that's going to be buying a knife just because it's the new fad or the new trend. What I mean by this is occasionally something takes the knife world by storm. Like the most recent example I can think of is Magna Cut. Like everyone started trying to make a knife in that. Like even Leatherman made a multi-tool to have a Magna Cut blade on it because it was that popular. I'm not saying Magna Cut isn't awesome. From everything I've seen, it really is. But where people make a mistake is they think just because there's the new hotness, that their old knife isn't as good anymore. Just because Magna Cut came out or whatever the new Super Steel is, doesn't mean a D2 knife isn't still great. Or it doesn't mean CPM 154 doesn't do an amazing job. Like the equivalent for the gun world would be a new caliber, like 30 Super Carry. So just because something's a trend or a fad doesn't mean it won't be around for a long, long time, and it might even become the new standard. But what I'm saying here is that just because there is a new trend, your old stuff is still as good as it was before. Don't feel like you have to go replace it. Like my multi-tool that I daily carry is an old school Leatherman Wave, and it still does amazing. I know the ARC is out and there's all these probably slightly better options, but I haven't felt like I have to replace my old one just because there's something new out. It still does what I need it to do and does a good job. So if something new comes out and you love it, you love the design, and you would buy it even if nobody was talking about it, then awesome, go buy it. But don't buy it just because it's the hot new thing and everybody's talking about how it's 10 times better than what was out before. If you have any mistakes that you think people should avoid when buying a knife, let me know down in the comments. Thank you for watching.